Let's go over the basic punctuation and spacing rules when you do an MLA in-text citation. Essentially, this is the order that you should always use. There are certainly exceptions, but in general, you will finish whatever words you're quoting. You'll end it with those quotation marks. Then you'll put a space, your left parenthesis, your keyword, we'll talk about that in a little bit, the page number, right parenthesis, then a period. I have left out a couple of spaces here, so we're going to go through those a little bit in detail because the spacing does matter. So here's an example of one that looks correct. You'll see that it's a full sentence. This one happens to have a weaved-in quotation. So it says, this allows the audience a safe space to identify with playfulness as a philosophical stance. And so the part that comes from Tom Robbins is in quotation marks here. And then Robbins is telling us where it comes from, and 58 tells us the page that it comes on. We don't know all of the context of this source, so all of that would have been taken care of elsewhere. So the first thing that we have to remember is that there is nothing between the end of the quoted words and that ending quotation mark. There's no space there, there's no comma, there's no period. If there is an exception there, that I'll talk about in a second, but what would happen if we had a comma or a period there? I want you to think about that just for a moment and consider what exactly a parenthetical is. It's essentially just an added thought, a whisper, by the way. And so if I had a period here, then I would be finishing my sentence and then whispering, and what would it be about? And so a parenthetical also could be removed here. It's important information, but if it weren't there, if I had a comma here and I were to remove this citation, I would have comma, end quote, period. And that doesn't make any sense to have a comma and a period next to each other. So keep that in mind, that that's the why, that there's nothing at all here. You end your word, you end your quote. The exception to that is if there is a question mark or exclamation point that is that you have to include in the actual quote. If the quote asked a question, not if you are asking a question, but if the quote includes a question or an exclamation point, then it is a key part of the quote, then you include it. That is not the case for commas, periods, semicolons, colons, etc. Those are droppable punctuations as we consider them. Right after that, you are going to put a space here. A lot of people somehow miss this space. So please double check and make sure that you have a space there. If not, you've essentially smushed the words stance and Robbins together. And that doesn't make any sense either, because this stands as a word and this stands as a word. So we need a space between words, and that makes just plain grammar usage sense from first, second grade. Then after we start our parenthetical citation, inside our parentheses, first we're going to have the keyword. We can deal with keywords and exactly what they are elsewhere, but here I'm just going to say that essentially it should be the author's last name. And that's what it usually is. There are exceptions that we'll deal with some other time, or we'll get into in a different segment. So if I said, Robbins allows for, or something like that, then I would have already said it, in which case I would take it out here. So that's where I would omit it if it's redundant, but don't worry about that too much right now. This is more important that you put it right now until we get to really the details of MLA. Then you're going to put another space, and again, only a space. You need a space to separate things that are different, but you don't need a PP or a page or a paragraph or a comma or a colon. You need absolutely nothing. But do remember that it does go in this order: last name, then page number, with only a space between. And so that is the page number from the source. Please keep in mind that if your source doesn't have printed page numbers, not like if you printed it and your printer put on page numbers, but if anybody who was looking at the same source, if you got it online, if there are physical page numbers, no matter what device you look at it on, then you can put page numbers. If it doesn't have page numbers in the upper corner or in the bottom middle or something like that, then you would not put a page number at all here, and you would just end your parenthetical there, okay? Then you close the parentheses, the parenthetical there, and then a period. No space or anything else there. You're just ending that aside, putting your period. A couple of things to remember as you go through this whole thing. The citation is part of that sentence. A parenthetical, anything in parentheses, is an aside. It's a whisper, hey, by the way, this also is going on. It's extra information that in theory could just be dropped out. And so you can't have that all by itself. It has to be part of something, and it has to be part of the thing that it refers to. So you have to physically connect it. You can't have a period before it. The second thing that you want to remember is that commas and periods only occur when they are grammatically necessary. Don't add any just because it seems like it should go there. If you don't know the rule that puts it there, leave them out, okay? When in doubt, leave them out is always my rule with commas and actually most punctuation. Spaces, think about spaces, separating things naturally. You don't want to smush words together. You don't want to smush a word and a punctuation together if they're not supposed to go there. Typically, punctuation directly follows words. And if it's like a quotation mark, it's going to connect it to the quote. But you always have to have spaces between words. Please do just think critically about punctuation, flow, and grammar usage. If you were to take some of those things out, does it still work? If you were to take the quotation marks out, would your sentence still read grammatically and with flow and without any extra punctuation marks? So think about that. And also, what would that sentence and punctuation look like without the parenthetical situation? And if it weren't there, then have you added some other piece of punctuation? Those things will help you to remember why those things work the way they do. There are some other things. These are extra. These are not the things that we'll be holding you accountable for right off, but they are questions that sometimes people have. If your sentence continues after the stuff that you're citing, where do you put that citation? Where do you put that parentheses to say where you got that? Then you're going to put it at the first natural pause, which means a semicolon, a period, obviously, is how it always works. Or if you've got a comma coming up, then you would just put it at the first natural break in the sentence. If you have no keyword and no page, so it's an electronic source and you don't have, and you've already used the keyword in the sentence, then you're not going to have a parenthetical citation at all. You're just going to end your sentence, and then you need to follow the other punctuation rules that you have. And then lastly, keywords we will get into in a lot more depth somewhere else. But as I said earlier, they are typically the last name of the author that wrote the work that you are citing. But if you don't have an author and it just starts with your citation on your works cited page just starts with a title, then you're going to use the most important first word or words in that title, also punctuated with quotation marks or italics, the way that it would be in there. So those are the things that you might come up with. If you've got other questions, please make sure that you double check. Sometimes the internet can help, but certainly your teachers can help as well.